Hello, Jamie Allen Bishop here with Soul Heart Entertainment for today's ToesDay readings. Today is September 22nd, 2020, and it's been quite a year, hasn't it? Here in United States, specifically in Southern California, we are still under pretty strict restrictions related to COVID-19. So there's been a lot of challenges that people have come across this year as far as what life looks like and, you know, kind of decisions, how to go from here. There's been a lot of changes in what was once a reality, and to me they seem like changes for the good, changes for the better. I think that all of us can agree that the brick and mortar business model that has been so prominent in our lives and our reality for so many years has been slowly coming to an end. And not to say that brick and mortar isn't going to exist at all anymore, but this COVID quarantine situation has definitely driven brick and mortar style businesses to a new reality. It's been a new way of thinking of doing business for a lot of people. It's not new per se, but the bigger businesses have been in that newness for a while now, and it's kind of coming down to the reality of the mom and pop shop needing to go online and gain customer following through social media and other networking ways of getting their word out. Now, what's really fascinating to me in the big picture, which is what the month of September is all about in the toe reading world, for me anyway, we're talking about destiny and big toes and big picture in our lives. And so the reason why I'm bringing up the COVID situation and the quarantine situation and how it's affected businesses, both small and large, is that we have to kind of reimagine or redefine or possibly renegotiate what our idea is of reality for us as far as our businesses. Soul Heart Entertainment, the business that I own and run, has been doing business online for 6 years now. So it was a very seamless transition for us, to the degree that it wasn't even a transition at all. We've been doing parties online, we've been doing individual readings, cards, toes, psychic readings, all of that kind of stuff has all been online for about 6 years now. And so the COVID thing has just put us in a situation where this online business model is now more recognized as a solid foundation for conducting business. And it's kind of forced people into, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's forced people into reality. It's forced people into potentially a new way for them to be thinking about how to conduct business. So when it comes to doing business online, one of the most exciting things about that is that we get to kind of define it however we want. We get to determine what our big picture is as far as our reality and how we conduct that business to whatever we want it to be. So it's a really, really exciting time. So I welcome you to consider thinking of the way that business is being done online, in that really, even though it's not necessarily new, it might be new to you or new to some of the people that you know. And I think it's just kind of forcing the flow of reality into kind of going with the flow around the online business. There's been a lot of resistance to it. And so this COVID thing has really forced us kind of into doing it, whether we want to or not, right? And I feel very blessed that I was already in that reality, so it wasn't a big transition for me or my business, so thankfully. So, and if you have questions about how we've been conducting business and what that looks like, I'm more than happy to answer those questions for you. But when it comes to the big picture in our life and our destined path, one of the ways that this has been a huge blessing is because if you've lost your job, or if your hours have been cut, or if your company isn't able to imagine how to conduct business from home, or allowing you kind of the freedom, if you will, of conducting business at home, one of the ways that we, as the people who work for those big companies that are struggling, get to participate in that is through the integral piece of the puzzle, showing that, you know, we don't have to actually physically show up in order to be able to conduct our work, in order to be able to get it done and feel a lot less stress about maybe sitting in traffic, or about, you know, leaving on time to get the kids in time. You know, some of the challenges that I know that some families have been dealing with are in dealing with kids at home and trying to conduct business at home. And so maybe we're redefining our spaces in our homes to create some sort of distance between the small children and where we conduct our business. So it's really kind of forced us into this fantastic new way of doing business. And like I said before, even though it's not officially new, it might be new to us. It might be new to how we're managing our lives. And I would love to know what that looks like for you. I would love to know if the way that business is being conducted these days, if it's working for you, or if it's not. And if it's not, where are you struggling around that? I might have some really good suggestions. I might have some really powerful ideas on how you can choose to look into maybe different ways of seeing it, right? So one of the ways that we can look at our toes to see where we are with our subconscious thoughts, especially when it comes to how we're dealing with our big picture in our life, is by looking down at our big toe and looking at, okay, so in toe reading, we're looking for the subconscious thoughts, feelings, and emotions that might be holding us back. I think that we can all agree that our conscious thoughts are things that we're consciously pursuing, or consciously saying out loud, or consciously, you know, putting steps in motion to follow some sort of reality, or our version of reality. Perception is a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. But it's this idea that we have a little bit more control over the perceptions and the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions if it's on the conscious level. When it's on the subconscious level, it's things that just are happening in our lives and in our reality and in our experience that may be, I have a tendency to think of subconscious thoughts as the thoughts that drag us, that I don't want to say they hold us back, because we are exactly where we're supposed to be in reality. We are doing business exactly the way we're supposed to be doing business. We are creating our lives exactly the way that they're supposed to be created. And by the word supposed to, I'm saying that, you know, that's where the lessons are. That's where the lessons that we need to learn in order to truly love, accept, and forgive ourselves for whatever it is that we've experienced in life. And when we're talking big toes, we're talking about the destined path or the big picture. And so when you look at your big toes, you're describing exactly that to yourself. So if you're saying your toes are fat, you have a big future. You have big ideas about your future. You have big ideas that maybe you're holding back. If that big toe has kind of a thicker padding at the, or like a bulbous top at the top of the toe. I'll just show you a little picture of, see how this toe is kind of coming straight off and then it kind of bubbles out. And so that like bulbousness is, to me, that's somebody who's holding back, who has these really great big ideas, but maybe they're a little concerned about the people around them and what they might think of these big ideas. And maybe they are afraid of being accepted or not being accepted if they were to share these big ideas with the people that they surround themselves with. Another idea is that we have here, these are big toes that have kind of a pointed padding, if you will, so that the pointedness of the padding tells me that this is somebody who definitely knows where they're going, that their future is very driven, it's very precise. There's a very specific, kind of direction that they're choosing their reality in. Now, if they're going through something that they want to change, that they maybe want to soften that directness, they want to maybe see a little bit of a bigger picture in life, that would be, you literally would manipulate the pads of your toes by giving them a little bit of a massage, maybe scrubbing off some calluses that show up, or at least softening them by working the skin and creating a little bit more softness around any kind of hardened skin. Because hardened skin has a tendency to mean, and callousing and hardened skin has a tendency to mean that there's a little layer of protection there. There's a little layer of hardness. I kind of think of a turtle, like, the hard shell is what keeps them protected, but really they're, kind of soft and gushy inside. So, the reality is that when we create calluses on our toes and we create them in specific places, they might mean specific things. So if they're on, let's say, the center of the toe, so if I'm looking at this, looks like there's a little bit of callusing right there. So that is on that past line of where that reality is. So what from the past is this person maybe experiencing that might be keeping them from having a grander view or a more wide viewpoint to look at reality from, especially reality when it comes to the big picture and or her destined path. So yeah, so that's what would come up in that particular toe reading. Now this one has a little bit softer padding. It has a little bit more rounded at the tip padding. But as you can see on these toes, you're looking at, if I were to, kind of take that and if I were to cut that toe in half, that side of the toe does not have nearly as much padding on it as that side of the toe. Does that make sense? So when I'm seeing that, I'm seeing that this side of the padding is, it's very past thought thinking. And so if I were to sit with this person, I would say you're seeing a big picture, you're really good at planning that and mapping that out and seeing the wide range of things that need to be done and how reality needs to be handled. The question that I would ask is, are you stuck in the past around what that looks like, and or around being able to trust maybe. And then I would look at the trust toe and see where that one lies in relation to the big toe. And, you know, this past experience that this person keeps dwelling on is, if it continues to show up in her reality. For example, let's say that she delegated a really important responsibility in that big picture plan that she's so good at creating. If she delegated something to somebody and they totally dropped the ball on it, or maybe they took that ball and ran with it somewhere else, you know, maybe they stole an idea and created something on their own, or I mean, there's any number of things that could have happened in this person's life, and, you know, it scared them, basically. It scared them from taking action for themselves right here, right now, without having that past experience sort of come back to haunt them. If that's, I know that's the right way to say it, so I'm not even going to say that phrase. But, so where in the big picture in their lives are they focusing too much on the past? And how is that keeping them from moving forward with their current plans and their current reality? And, you know, from that point, as a client, we would go into the EFT tapping, which is emotional freedom technique. It's this idea that our, you know, much like toe reading, our bodies hold on to the energy and stories that we have stored from either our past experiences or from, you know, maybe somebody told us something that we just latched onto and believed to be, you know, absolutely the truth. And when the, oh, hi, Nikki. Thanks for watching. Thank you for being here, really. So when we're trying to release that emotion or release that subconscious, that deep-rooted subconscious thought, EFT is a fabulous way to do that to me. In the version of EFT that I use, I also use neurolanguaging to make sure that that we work that in there, if that makes sense. So like we're hitting the trigger points, which is what the EFT does. It kind of taps into the trigger points on our body that help the nervous system release those thoughts and ideas. And then I use the correct neuro language programming to help release those thoughts that aren't serving our highest purpose path. So we were talking about how these toes, this person is really holding back on sharing their big picture ideas, which they have a ton of big picture ideas, but they're really holding back on sharing those with anybody. Maybe it's out of fear, maybe it's out of, you know, well, it would definitely be out of fear. We don't really hold back anything unless we're in a state of fear, right? If we're completely comfortable with everybody knowing everything that there was to know, we wouldn't, our toes would not bubble up like this. They would not have this kind of bubbling that happens as far as the tips of the padding. Where I was showing earlier that one of the interesting things about the padding of toes, specifically big toes, is that, I mean, this one comes to almost a cone shape, if you will, like I want to say a diamond shape. Okay, so I kind of think like this person probably has, I mean, I hate to say this, but kind of rattlesnake-like reactions if things aren't kind of on track of what she believes and perceives is the reality of where the big picture should be for her. So she's probably really hard on herself and others when it comes to meeting deadlines or getting, but that could be good. I mean, she might be in a job that's 100% based on deadlines, and without somebody kind of driving that train and really, you know, whipping people into shape and making sure that they're on task and on point, to get that information to her in order to do her job. You know, you wouldn't want somebody like this with the rounded toes and kind of holding back the big picture and the big ideas to be in that kind of job, because they'd be more contemplative, they'd be more in a state of let's talk about this, let's try to figure things out, as opposed to somebody who's a little bit more, you know, straight and arrow about what reality looks like in that big picture thing, right? You would not hire the same, you know, those two sets of toes for the same job ever. Toe reading can be, in fact, it's interesting. Toe reading can be an incredibly accurate way to determine your employees. Casey Miller, the SWIHA, Southwest Institute of Healing Arts teacher who taught me everything I know, is adamant about making sure that, especially in the upper management positions in her university, that she looks at those toes, man. They, you know what, good interview techniques. Is that what you want me to talk about, Nikki? Good interview techniques? Because I can definitely touch on that. Or are you commenting that the different personality types would be like, I would guess that more people get hired in the spring and summer than get hired in the, yes, she definitely looks at people's toes, no doubt about it. Casey Miller is all about making sure that those toes fit the job description, right? Hi, Simon, thanks for joining. So, you know, for example, I was talking a little bit earlier about these toes. When we're looking at the big picture in relation to these toes, you can see that if I were to cut that down the middle, the future side, which is what's showing right now on the big toe, it doesn't have nearly as much padding as this side, which is the past side, right? There's a lot more padding on the past side of these big toes. So it leads me to believe that these toes are very focused on that past. And so one of the things that tells me is that this is going to be a much more cautious person when it comes to the big picture, and when it comes to following through on things, they're going to be more cautious than, let's say, somebody with the pointed toes. Somebody with the pointed toes is going to be go, 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 get it done, get it done, get it done. And it's going to be really, really obvious that they have two very, very different personality types. You know, somebody like this is an interesting toe as well. This is, you can see that these toes kind of come straight up, but then at the top, they kind of flatten out, if you can see that. There's a little bit more of a flatness to that padding on these toes than on either of the other toes that I showed you. And when you see a little bit more flatness to the top of the toe, on any toe, but because we're talking about big toes, we'll talk about that. Flatness to the toe means kind of a little bit more of a wide perspective. So they're going to be able to take in the realities all around them. And because her toes didn't bubble up too much, and they didn't necessarily, they didn't go to a point, but they definitely, they definitely stayed fairly straight. You can see that she's somebody who's going to be able to see the big picture and kind of know how to react and when to react, and she's going to be really good about keeping things very methodical, keeping things very progressive, seeing that big picture, seeing that big picture reality. She's probably going to be really, really good at seeing it for other people, whereas like somebody who has a little bit more holding back going on is going to be a little bit more caught up in their own story, as opposed to this kind of a personality that is, these toes are a lot straighter or thinner, or, really what it is that the padding from one side to the next is pretty even on those toes, right? And there's no real bubbling up. So there's not as much holding back on these toes as there are on these. There's just a lot of holding back, a lot of concern about acceptance and being approved of. And so this is going to be somebody who's going to be a better somebody who's following, basically, somebody who needs mentorship. This is somebody who's going to need mentorship in order to be able to create a big picture. Now, they have fantastic ideas. They have a lot of really, really good ideas, but getting them to a point where they're comfortable enough to share those ideas, that's why they need a mentor, right? So yeah, so that is a little bit about toe reading. I started this conversation off discussing a little bit about how COVID has affected, and really it's not COVID specifically, it's just the fact that we've been sort of forced into this quarantine scenario, and that has really affected businesses, and specifically brick and mortar businesses. So when you look at how business has changed and you project into the future how business might be affected by this permanently, I think that we can all agree that there's going to be a lot higher comfort level around conducting business online. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to be comfortable with it. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to want to go back to the brick and mortar scenario, but it's going to mean that there is a higher rate of success for online businesses, for businesses that do not have that brick and mortar overhead. Let's face it, it's an expensive thing for a lot of businesses. You know, I think of the real estate industry, and I think of how few people in the real estate industry actually go to an office. They're far more likely to be out in the community, looking at various and assorted other, showing homes to their potential clients, looking at homes to make sure that they fit a caliber that they themselves are trying to. I certainly hope that most real estate agents are honing in on who their niche market is, because if you're not, and you're saying, well, everybody, I'll sell my house to everybody, you're leaving yourself way too open. And what's interesting about that is that the narrower you scope your market or your ideal client, the more likely you are to get a lot of those type of clients. So let's say you're somebody who loves beach communities and beach houses. If you narrow your market to beach houses, not only will you love going to see them, you'll love showing people them, you'll love the people that want to live there because they're going to have that kind of same feel that you feel for the beach communities, and so you'll vibe together better. You know what I'm saying? So it's fascinating to me how the more niche people get, the higher their success rate goes through the roof, right? The higher their success rate is. So anyway, so that's a little bit about the big toe, and how it fits into the current climate of working from home. So how you're making decisions going forward, just keep in mind that there's going to be a much more prominent feel around working from home. You need to create those separate spaces so that you can work, and that there are spaces for family time, and that there are spaces for just you to hang out and separate yourself from your work if you do work from home. Those are the reality of today's day and age, right? I was talking a little bit earlier about how the parents who have homeschooled children, and more specifically the parents with much younger children, are really having to completely redefine how they conduct both business and their kids' education, because now they're expected to make sure that their kids are staying online in their online classrooms. And you, as an employer, you can't expect that that employee is going to be able to be focused on both making sure that their kids attend their online school and get your report out on time. You're going to have a little bit of a different scenario. So it's just a matter of reimagining what your reality looks like, how to go about implementing that, very clear definitions of spaces in your home that are very dedicated. So like, letting everybody in your household know that if I'm sitting here and this is the scenario, I am not to be disturbed because I'm in the middle of my business or whatever. Maybe, anyway, I think you guys kind of get it. If you have any questions at all, please type them in below and I will get to them ASAP. And in the meantime, think of questions. Yes, so many lives are changing, no doubt about it, no doubt about it. And if we think about it, it really is for the better. It's going to, any kind of change takes time, and any kind of change takes a certain amount of an adjustment period. And it does take an adjustment period. I'm not discounting the idea of going through that adjustment period. However, if we look at that big picture of the reality of brick and mortar versus, being able to conduct business from home and compete with some of those big name companies out there, we're talking about a very unique proposition that has never occurred before in business. And so it's kind of exciting. The other idea is that we're turning more to what this has done, and the thing that happened with the grocery stores and everything being out of stock and whatever. We're really putting more of a reality, or we're really putting more stock in, literally, our own communities, which is probably how it should have been all along. It's just kind of forced us into this reevaluation of what that reality looks like to us. So are we making sure that we buy from our local produce as opposed to international or, out of state produce even? Are we making sure that we're, growing stuff ourselves, things that we can grow ourselves? Are we doing that now? I think there's a lot more people that are, after having to face some of the grocery stores being out of things. It's funny, one of the things that I have had a very, very hard time finding over the last, let's say, 3 months is pots for plants. Like I've tried to plant a few things recently and I can't find pots anywhere. I can't find them online. I can't find them in stores. It's crazy. It's totally crazy to me. Let's see, what are you saying, Nikki? It is a complex household now. I'm not 100% sure what that means. And then I think we're going back to how things were when we were babies in the 60s and 70s. There is a little bit of a back shift, but I don't think that it's necessarily a back shift. Well, when I think of the 60s and 70s, I definitely think of us just starting to push past that patriarchal kind of societal regulations. So we were just starting to question whether, mom needs to stay home with the kids. And really she started to get moms started to get jobs in the 60s and 70s. And then, added to all of that challenge was that now mom was being exposed to more men. And so the health of relationships was a little bit more challenged, marriages specifically, because because mom wasn't staying home and wondering about other guys, she was now being in the middle of other guys. So she got to experience maybe a little bit more affection and attention from somebody other than her husband. So, and not to say that men didn't have a reality in, in that factor of moms going back to, basically, moms just started to become more aware of the fact that cheating happened, and, you know, maybe not being as okay with it as they once upon a time were, you know, semi-forced to be. And, you know, I don't want to get into any kind of crazy dynamics around this. It was a new reality that everybody had to adjust to. And I think that we're better adjusted to it now. And there's a little bit more of an ebb and flow as far as men and women having certainly more opportunities than ever before. And it's exciting. I think it's really, really exciting. But that brick and mortar company is starting to become no longer as important. If it's funny, I'm a crafter at heart. Okay. I love like, doll houses and, you know, knitting and all of the kind of craftsy things. And every weekend, my family and I travel somewhere within driving distance of where we live. And every time I see a little craft shop that is, you know, in whatever tiny town that we happen across, I always wonder whether they are able to survive if they're not online. If they're online, they survive no problem. No problem at all, like almost no problem. They have to get their stuff, they have to take photographs of it, they have to price it, they have to get it online. But the number of people that come through their brick and mortar store wouldn't sustain that brick and mortar store. It couldn't. Or the reality would be that they would have to pretty much do 100% of their business, or, you know, more than 90% of their business in, let's say, the 3 months out of the year that the public came through their little town. Like, so it's a really interesting dynamic that this has shifted, especially like those teeny tiny little mom and pop stores. Anyway, so without going further down that rabbit hole, because that we could talk about that for hours and hours and hours, couldn't we? Let's see, Nikki, it says, yes, it was more community-based and trusting your neighbors. Yes, I mean, we definitely, hell, we knew our neighbors back in the 60s and 70s, right? Like you would never have lived next to somebody that you didn't know them personally, or know their name, or know their kids, or interact. We just moved from like a totally adorable home community in Alabama, and Alabama's pretty well known for that. Everybody knows everybody. I mean, I think that even across the United States, even with all of the, you know, crazy things that people think of when they think of the state of Alabama, they automatically assume that either everybody's related, or at least that everybody knows each other, right? I mean, it's automatically assumed. And the reality is that if we lived in this neighborhood, we knew 3, or maybe, I mean, I knew of a 4th family, and we lived in a, you know, 150 family neighborhood. And the 4 families that I knew, 2 of them were true neighbors. They lived right next door. And then the other 2 were out, you know, kind of beyond where we were. And the only reason why I knew them was because they knew the 2 neighbors that were right next door to us. So anyway, my point is, yes, we definitely got to know our neighbors a lot better back then, and we were expected to, right? There was a high expectation that, especially if you stayed home with your kids, you worked kind of together as a community. All the moms, all the wives worked together to take care of each other. They had potlucks, you know, I think every, you know, Friday or Sunday or Saturday, everybody would get together and kind of do a little neighborhood party. Like, that was kind of the reality of it. And what quarantine has definitely forced us to do is reevaluate where we stand when it comes to getting to know our neighbors, making sure that we're self-sustaining, making sure that we're hiring our local people and buying from our local stores. And some of that reality has been challenged because in all of this, what just fascinates me is that the big stores are the only ones that are allowed to be open because they're the only ones that are necessary, which is BS, but it's probably getting into too much politics. So I will avoid that. But anyway, so that's a little bit about how the big picture relates to the big toe, which relates to our destined path and how COVID has kind of changed everything reality-wise for us. So as you're looking at your big toes, definitely contemplate, where are you holding back? Where are you maybe focused too much on either the future or the past? And how can you shift those things into more of the idea of feeling confident and comfortable, let's just say daydreaming about the things that you want to attract into your life. And, you know, that's the other thing, is where are we not allowing ourselves to receive around attracting those things that are in that big picture destiny for us and in that reality for us, or lack of reality. Maybe we only believe that we can just imagine it, we can't really have it. So where is that cutting us off from being allowed to receive the fantastic things that we have in our mind's eye over our destined path and our destiny and that big picture in our life? So I just welcome you to live more in the fantasy of it and the excitement of it, and shift that energy so that every time you think about it, you don't think, oh, I don't have that yet. Instead, you're thinking, ooh, I can't wait until that's a reality. That is a reality because it's my imagination reality, and I'm okay with that for now, but I want it to come to me like soon. I love those kind of thoughts. Anyway, thank you for joining. Thank you for being here, Nikki. Thank you, Simon, for jumping on. And if you have any questions for next week is our last week of toe reading for the big picture and our destined path. It also happens to be the last week that toe readings are half off this month. And this is the last month that I'm going to be offering toe readings for any kind of discount. So if you're interested in toe reading or interested in getting gift certificates for somebody for the holidays coming up, definitely consider that half price. Yeah. So, all right. Yep. Let's see. Yeah. That's a good way to think of the future. It's what makes me happy when I think about, I try to think about it in the present tense. I try to think about what it looks like for me now instead of putting it out in the future. And I try to just imagine being there and how peaceful and happy and just the reality of now, even though I don't physically see it in my experience now, it still feels like it's right here, right now, which I take great pleasure in those kind of experiences. So I welcome you to give it a shot and see what you can bring into your life. What kind of magic can you create? All right, guys, thanks for being here. Jamie Allen Bishop with Soul Heart Entertainment. Talk to you soon. See you next Tuesday for ToesDay.